Hi and welcome to a new tutorial on my channel. I'm Andrea, and in this tutorial I want to show you how to make the neckline shaping for a top such as this one. This is Tunisian crochet and it can be worked in a gradient yarn. I have a second sample started here and I will show you how to make the short rows on the strap here for the neckline shaping, and how to bind off and how to make the slip stitches necessary to reach the other side where you start the second strap, as you can see here. You will find the link to this pattern in the description, and you can use any gradient yarn for this pattern, for example some Cotton Kings, Sultan, or this custom gradient cake of yarn that you can get from Sparvole for your size and your preferred length. The top that I have here is 600 meters per side, so 1200 meters in total. And the dress that I will be making from this yarn will be longer because I have twice the amount of yarn. For this demonstration, I'm using the 4mm hook that I'm using for the rest of the project, and a 2.5mm regular crochet hook that will be used for making the slip stitches on the edge. You can also use a 3mm hook depending on what kind of hook you have. This one goes through the fabric much easier. So as you have noticed, this pattern starts with one foundation row, upon which you build up the straps from the bottom up, and then you pick up stitches to work the rest of the top. You have stitch counts for all the rows in the pattern, and you begin with a bit of shaping for the underarm here in the first two rows. And then you start shaping the neckline as well using short rows. I have demonstrated short rows before. The only difference from regular rows is that you skip the chain 1 at the end of the forward pass to begin the short row return pass. So let me demonstrate that. In this case I stopped decreasing because I want the straps to be wider than in the case of the summer top, because these straps will have to support the weight of the entire dress. So I stopped earlier than in the pattern, and you can do that too if you want wider straps. So now that the neckline and armhole shaping is on, I will just continue with short rows until I reach the desired length for the armhole. Making the short rows is quite simple. You just pick up stitches as usual. In my case, 5 stitches. These are Tunisian simple stitches, and then one last stitch, or in this particular pattern it is also written as a simple stitch. All you have to do is insert the hook behind the 2 vertical bars that cross at the end of the row and pick up a loop. Now since these are called short rows, we don't chain 1 and yarn over pull through 2, we just yarn over pull through 2. That's the difference from a regular return pass. And in a blanket, for example, you want this edge to be the same height as the rest of the rows. So you want to add an extra chain here, and that will create a looser edge here. But for this pattern, we want a tight edge. So we repeat this. Five simple stitches, one last stitch behind the 2 vertical bars at the end, then yarn over pull through 2 to the beginning of the row to return. And this is how you work with short rows that are stacked. In the pattern you will also have short rows that are not stacked. So you have, for example, we pick up 5 simple stitches, and then we yarn over pull through 2 to return. This makes a short row that ends before the end of the previous row. And if you have to stack one more row on top of it, then you have 4 simple stitches, one loop under the 2 vertical bars, and then yarn over, pull through 2. And this creates that tight edge that I'm talking about. If you were to make a chain 1 and then yarn over, pull through 2, you would have a hole, which is not so bad, but in this pattern it's not recommended. So let me show you. If you chain 1 and then yarn over, pull through 2, it doesn't look much more different, right? But if you stack these rows for the strap, you'll see that the edge is a bit looser and you have this extra loop here, which is not as obvious in the stacked short rows. So either method works, but I prefer this one because when we finish the strap, we will have to slip stitch into all of these stitches. And I will show that to you after I finish my strap. I will frog down to here and I will continue with 6 stitches or 5 stitches in the last stitch. And then I will show you how to bind off and how to slip stitch along this edge, so that you have a nice and even edge, like in this case. And then you can put single crochet stitches in there, or a half double crochet stitch and then a single crochet stitch, as I did in this case. One more thing that I want to show you. If this side is a bit loose when you make the short rows, the easy way to fix it is to pull on the working yarn after making the first 2 or 3 loops. That way you tighten up the beginning of the row, and then you don't have problems with one side being much taller than the other. You'll also be able to fix this when you slip stitch along this edge, but it's better to start with a good side than to have to fix it with slip stitches, which can leave some big loops if the edge is a bit too loose. Once you finish the strap to the length that you want, you have 2 options. You can cut the yarn here and pull the end through this live loop, and then maybe use it later to seam up the strap with the corresponding strap from the other side. Or you can bind off and slip stitch along this edge until you reach the stitch you mark to begin the second strap. In the pattern, I tell you exactly how many loops to count from on the first row, so that you put a marker in the stitch corresponding to that loop on the current row, and this is where you stop with the slip stitches, or you can just join with new yarn here. I will show you how to bind off along the top edge and then how to slip stitch along the side. So we switch to the regular crochet hook, and to bind off all you have to do is slip stitch into each one of these stitches. I like to bind off using the modified simple stitch. So you go with the hook behind the vertical bar and the horizontal bar of the next stitch, yarn over and draw up a loop, and then we pull this loop through the loop on the hook. This makes the top roll a bit less, so under the front vertical bar, under the front horizontal bar, draw up a loop and slip it off. You want to work loosely so as to not change the width of the fabric. When you reach the last stitch, you don't have a front horizontal bar anymore, so you go behind the front vertical bar. That's 5 slip stitches, and then you slip stitch in the last stitch by going behind the 2 vertical bars here at the end. Now you have to turn the corner, so chain 1, and then make 1 more slip stitch in the same stitch. Then continue with slip stitches along the side of the work, leaving them quite loose. If you want to, you can skip the chain 1 here at the end, but I like to keep it because it keeps the edge quite square here, and then it's easy to seam the other strap from the other side. So I will go ahead and make the slip stitches into the side here. And you want to work loosely because after you are finished with the 2 sides, you will have to slip stitch into these stitches again and then make the finishing rows. You can have 1 row of single crochet stitches or 1 row of half double crochet stitches and then 1 row of single crochet stitches. It's your choice what you want to make here. But the idea is to have a nice finished edge. If you want to, you can just stick with the slip stitches and that will work as well. This edge was easy because you don't have any decreases here or increases. But once you reach the part where you have changes in the stitch counts, you will need to take some decisions. Now I've reached the row with more stitches on it. What I do is to slip stitch behind the vertical bar of the last stitch and under the 2 bars of the actual last stitch on the row. That makes the edge smooth here. So on the next row there is no decrease, so just slip stitch behind the last stitch. Again, we have 2 of these. You could theoretically go behind these 2 loops here and make a slip stitch. That's also possible, but I like to have a more secure slip stitch, so I go under all 3 of these loops. Again, we have the same case. Once more. You want to go slowly here. 1 more case where you have just 1 stitch of a difference. When you reach a row where there are more stitches that were skipped, you do the bind off for 1 stitch and then slip stitch for the edge. Here we have again the same case, bind off for 1 stitch and slip stitch for the edge. Then bind off 1 stitch, bind off another stitch and slip stitch on the edge. And repeat this until you reach row 3 of the pattern, which is the row that both straps have in common. And here you just make bind offs using the vertical and a horizontal bar, just like when binding off at the top, until you reach the marked stitch. As you can see, I'm working loosely and not pulling back on the working yarn so that the stitches are the same length as the chains from the return pass. You do this one more time in the marked stitch and then switch back to the Tunisian crochet hook to continue with the second strap. This is what the edge looks like now for the strap, and you can see that there are no issues, no problems with the short rows. There are no steps, so it's quite a smooth rounded edge here. I need to show you the same thing for the other side. When you finish both straps and both sides, you will join them here and at the top, and you will add a row of slip stitches all along. So now let's pretend that we did that and that you finished the slip stitches on the second strap, and you need to continue with slip stitches on this side as well. I will attach some yarn to demonstrate how to do this. Here we have a bind off edge, so we slip stitch into the bind off loosely again. Slip stitch into the bind off, and one more slip stitch into the bind off. And next we have a jump to the next row. So instead of going through here, we slip stitch into the next bind off here. So these bind offs come from the shaping of the strap at the beginning of the row. And we continue doing this. Slip stitch in the bind offs. Until you reach the place where you don't have any bind offs anymore. So no decreases. When you reach a row where there is no decrease, you go behind the first stitch and under the loop on the back side of the work, as if you wanted to connect a short row. This ensures that there is no hole here where you make the slip stitch. Again, going behind the first stitch and then under the loop on the back and slip stitch. If you don't know which stitch to choose, just make sure that there is one slip stitch for each row and for each stitch. Sometimes you will have to choose, so use your judgment to pick the proper stitch. This is not an exact science. The point is to get a nice and smooth edge on this side as well, that you can work into to put the last row with the regular crochet. So for example, if you have one decrease, it's easier to put the hook behind the front stitch of the next row and pick up the back loop here than to work in the bind off. So this is what it looks like, and then when you are done with going around one full circle, you come back and you put single crochet stitches in all of these slip stitches. So that's the tutorial for today. I hope you will use this successfully in the pattern for the top that I showed you, and there are several tops actually that use this technique. So I hope this is useful for you in making a nice edge for your projects. If you want to know when I publish more similar patterns in Tunisian crochet and maybe knitting in the near future, subscribe to my email updates that I send out once a week on Friday, and you can sign up to be a tester for the patterns, or you can find where to buy the patterns. So I thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon with another video. Bye!